walking around at night is usually not a smart idea. This was especially true during the late 1800s in London. Today I will share with you the history of Jack the Ripper. His crimes were very interesting, and people are still theorizing about who Jack the Ripper actually was. There are three main parts when talking about Jack the Ripper. First is the setting and background of his crimes. Second is the details on his murder victims. And last are the possible suspects of being Jack the Ripper. The first main point about Jack the Ripper is the setting and background of his crimes. All of his crimes occurred in London during the year 1888 from the dates of August 31st through November 9th. These murders occurred on the streets and alleyways of London. Here's a picture that demonstrates a view of what the streets might look like at that time. The murders all occurred at the dead of night. And the reason why this was, written by Donald Rumlow, author of Jack the Ripper, the World Book Encyclopedia in 1982, wrote that he committed his crimes at night due to that's the hours when the prostitutes got off of work. All of his murders were committed at the eastern part of London. The eastern part was very populated, and it grew very still at night. There was also a high crime rate in this area, one of the most popular crimes being prostitution. Jack the Ripper was one of the most feared serial killers of the 19th century. He was given this name because of the knife he used to brutally kill his victims. He not only murdered the prostitutes, but he also put an exclamation point on his crime by cutting their bodies up excessively to send a message. Now that you know prostitution was a key part of the setting and background of Jack the Ripper, the next main point is the details on the murdered victims. All of the victims were killed in the same area of London. Here is a map of all the 5 murders, and it just demonstrates how close these murders actually were. People became very paranoid whenever they started hearing about these murders, and they would, as Ben Johnson in the 2015 article Jack the Ripper wrote, they would mug anyone that was carrying a black briefcase at night. The reason why this was is because it was known that Jack the Ripper carried a briefcase that he had his knife in. It was also known that Jack the Ripper must have had some medical history because of the way he quickly and precisely cut organs out of his victims. The first victim of Jack the Ripper occurred on August 31st, and it was Mary Ann Nichols. She was found on Buck Street, and her face was bruised up and her neck was slashed twice. She also had several stab wounds to the stomach, but no evidence was left behind. The next murder occurred on September 9th to Annie Chapman. Annie Chapman was found on the alleyway of 29th and Hanbury Street, and she was cut open and her intestines were hung over her shoulders and her bladder was removed. These third and fourth murders occurred on the same night of September 30th. The first victim was at 1 o'clock and was Elizabeth Stride. She was found still bleeding whenever the cops found her, which meant it was a fresh murder. At 1:45, Catherine Eddowes was murdered, and she had her eyelids, nose, and kidneys taken off. The last murder of Jack the Ripper was the most gruesome, and that was to Mary Jeanette Kelly on November 9th. She was found on a table at Miller's Court, and she had her heart and organs ripped out and laid on the table beside her. But no evidence was still left behind. Jack the Ripper was very precise and smart whenever he was making these murders by leaving no evidence. Which leads to my next main point, the possible suspects of being Jack the Ripper. The police issued a report that said that many homicidal lunatics were suspects. But there were 3 main categories described by Odell in his 2011 article, The Unusual Suspects, that Jack the Ripper had to have had. He had to have been used to the streets of East London, been able to blend into a crowd well, and also had knife experience. The police narrowed their suspects into 3 main people. Their names were Druitt, Krosminski, and Ostrog. The first suspect was Montague John Druitt. Morris, in his 2011 article, more than likely Cutbrush, Montague John Druitt, wrote that he was found dead in a river 2 days after the last murder. The police believe he drowned himself, which makes it very suspicious. The second suspect of being Jack the Ripper was Aaron Krosminski. And Marquise, in his 2011 article, The Mysteries of Aaron Krosminski, wrote that Aaron was very violent towards women and could become homicidal at any point. He was also entered into an insane asylum later in his life. The last suspect of being Jack the Ripper was Michael Ostrog. He was a Russian doctor who was entered into an insane asylum later on, but the interesting part is he could never describe his whereabouts to the police during the times of the murders. Here's a picture of Montague John Druitt, one of the first suspects of being Jack the Ripper. Jack the Ripper was one of the most famous serial killers of the 19th century, and he will be one of the most interesting. He had some of the most interesting techniques even to this day. There are three main parts when talking about Jack the Ripper: his setting and background of his crimes, the details on his murder victims, and the possible suspects of being Jack the Ripper. Many people are still theorizing on who Jack the Ripper is today. But the real question is, who do you think Jack the Ripper was? Thank you.